Good evening, folks, and welcome. Today we will be having an event called Herb Gardening 101. This is again with ideas for us and fleet farming. My name is Josh, and I am an event planner here at the library. I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping things before we get started. This project was made possible in part by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Thank you all for joining us. This is also part of NEA Big Read, which is a program with the National Endowment of Arts in partnerships with Art Midwest. This year, the Orange County Library System, in partnership with Valencia College, are celebrating the book Lab Girl by Hope Jaron. We've got a bunch of cool events happened already, and quite a few more, including a speech with the author of Lab Girl, Hope Jaron, on Saturday. So if you can attend that, that would be fantastic. We would love to have you there. And we have a lot of other events coming up until the 24th of April. So definitely check out ocls.info/bigread to get more information about all of our events coming up. But without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Caroline. Caroline is the Chief Operations Officer and Fleet Farming Program Manager with Ideas for Us. Today she's going to be teaching us about the best herbs to grow here in Central Florida and what we can use them all for. So thank you, and please join me in welcoming Caroline. Hey, how you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course.
So, I'm really excited today to talk about herb gardening. I think it's something that is kind of like an entry level for anybody who is interested in growing plants, whether it's for food or for aromatherapy or medicine, or even just for fun. I feel like herbs are a really easy way to get started. So, yeah, looking forward to diving into it today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And if anyone has any questions throughout the event, something that Caroline brings up or just something you've always wanted to know, please post those in the comments and we'll have like a little bit of a Q&A at the end where we'll just come back and talk to Caroline about it. So I'll let you get on with it. Thank you very much.
So, thank you. All right, so Herb Gardening 101. This class is intended for anybody that's getting started with their garden, or maybe you have a couple things going on and you want to know the proper way of introducing herbs. Herbs are kind of a wide topic. We think about them in the traditional sense of what we have maybe in our spice closet, or what we have in like little potted gardens, but we're going to learn a little bit more about what the word herb really means and how we can apply that in really fun ways. So I am Caroline Chomanics. I'm the Chief Operations Officer of Ideas for Us and the Fleet Farming Program Manager, as mentioned. So Ideas for Us is really an amazing environmental nonprofit started here in Orlando, Florida, that does environmental programming. And one of those environmental programs is fleet farming that turns the average American lawn into a productive micro farm. And we do that in a number of ways. And so Ideas for Us focuses on 5 different focus areas: energy, water, waste, ecology, and food. And so today we're going to be talking about food, but a little bit of ecology as well, because herbs can relate to what you have growing in the natural environment, right? It doesn't have to be a selective few set of herbs that we typically see being used. It can be any Florida native or native plant that has these medicinal qualities or has an aroma. So let's learn more about that with herb gardening. So my question to you is, what herbs do you have in your community? What do you consider an herb? Is that the mint that's growing alongside your house, or the rosemary that your neighbor has that you've never really seen them quite harvest and use? So there's different types of herbs that can be used, especially when we think about wildflowers and how those can be applied in herbal medicine. So we're going to learn more about that. What's really cool to me is the fact that we can go into these areas and harvest known plants, right? Plants that we can identify. We know that they're the certain cultivars that we are looking for. We can harvest their leaves, stems, roots, flowers to be able to use them in our everyday lives. And it's kind of amazing that, the biology of these plants, it seems to be that they're almost meant for people, right? And for these medicinal qualities. So I hope that this inspires you to go out into your community and to take a little bit of a deeper look. What kind of trees, shrubs, flowers do you have that you could maybe be using in ways throughout your life. And herbalism is just a really interesting topic in the study of herbal medicine, that is. And we are not an expert in herbal medicine, but there are definitely experts that we would recommend that we'll get to later, where you can explore this topic even more because it is a wide world of herbs. So what is an herb? Let's start with that. And any plant with leaves, stems, flowers used for flavoring, food, medicine, or perfume. So that just opens it up, right, on that term. Herbal medicine is the art and science of using herbs for promoting health, preventing, and treating illness. It has persisted as the world's primary form of medicine since the beginning of time, with a written history with more than 5,000 years old. And experts may have even more information on the history of herbalism. While the use of herbs in America have been overshadowed by the dependence on modern medications for the last 100 years, still 75% of the world's population relies heavily on traditional healing practices, and most of which is herbal medicine. So it's something that maybe we'll see when we get sick, right? We might take something like elderberry syrup or a mint tea when we have a headache. But it's something that our roots have, our family history has roots to, right? In the way that we have survived as a humanity over the years. So it's just a really interesting topic. And when I've talked to my herbalism friends, it's just, there's just so much to learn, right? Especially in how to apply this to your everyday life. All these plants are very diverse. There's so many different amazing books on the topic as well. And so the whole idea is that these plants, when they're used in certain applications and treatments, etc., in different forms, they can aid in different parts of the body. This is just a quick herb body map that I found related to the head, face, throat, heart, kidneys, bladder, lungs, stomach, and mind. And it's just really interesting that, you know, over time we've developed information on how these plants are associated with different parts of our body and in different dosages as well. So also there's different herbalism organizations and experts that I would totally recommend that you look up. No matter where you live, there is probably a holistic school of living or maybe an herbalism school in your area. I think Meetup is also a really great idea to find different groups near you where people have a history with the land, right? They have a history of knowing what's around that you can harvest and use and how to use it. And sometimes it can be a little bit tricky on how to use it as well because, you know, all of our bodies are so different and we take the different herbal medicines in other ways. But here's some that I found that I would suggest that you look into: the Florida School of Holistic Living, American Herbalist Guild, Chestnut School of Herbalism, United Plant Savers, American Botanical Council, and more. And also, it's good to mention that not all herbs are good for us, right? There's some things that we need to look out for. The first one that comes to mind is something like poison ivy, right? This has a negative reaction to our body whenever we touch it. Other plants like datura, morning glories, foxglove. So not all plants are safe. Also, some plants may look similar to each other, such as poison hemlock and members of the parsley family or wild carrot. But some are maybe toxic and others may be okay. So plant identification is definitely important. We kind of say the same thing when we talk about mushrooms, right? You want to make sure that you have an expert with you to know that that is the right mushroom and a clear identification of the variety that you're looking at, right? And also, like I mentioned, some herbs have a stronger effect on the body for different types of people. So before starting any herbal regimen, I would say that it's important to contact your medical professional, being that of an herbalist or an herbal expert for some advice before you get started, for sure. And there's different ways that people use herbs. They use herbs in teas, tinctures, glycerites, herbal syrups, oils, and salves. Salves are really cool. You know, if you get a cut or something like that, it can quickly soothe a burn or a cut and help to heal. I love buying locally made herbal salves for sure. Herbal vinegars, honeys, elixirs, soaks, etc. So there's some more high level things that you really want to make sure that you're doing the right way, you're doing your research on, talking to an herbalist, right? And then there's just some fun things that I've included in here, like, using edible flowers and ice cubes for a fun drink. Maybe you're making your own tea with that as well. One that I've made over the years is a quick mint tea. It's really great for headaches, and the flavor is pretty mild, actually. You just boil water and add the herbs to it. You can crush them up as well. Maybe add some sugar and some lemon, and you have your nice little you have yourself a nice little herbal tea. Another thing fun to do is, putting some herbs and wildflowers in your bathtub or as soaks with some Epsom salts. Maybe getting into aromatherapy and purchasing some herbal oils to add to your diffuser to incorporate them into your life. If you find herbs in your community, you can definitely hang them upside down in one of these little herb drying racks that you could also DIY, make one at home. So then you can have these available. I do this pretty regularly with oregano, and I'll get to some of the things of why I love oregano, but I dry my own, I crush it, and I put it into herb shakers of my own. I add that to a lot of my savory dishes for the medicinal qualities that it has. Other ways that you can use herbs are in an herbal first aid kit, which I think is such a fun idea. There's so many different blogs that have a clear list of what you can add to an herbal first aid kit and how you can build that out, which might be a fun project for you and your family. And then just adding herbs into the landscape, seeing that, certain pollinators are more attracted to your garden because you have the herbs, or you can eat the herbs and different culinary dishes. So there really is a lot to it. If you're a crafty person or you're just always looking for the next project, there's so much when it comes to herbs. So maybe one of the ones that I just mentioned or something else from your research could be the next project that you have involving local herbs in your community. So there's some traditional herbs that we typically know of in talks of herbalism or herb gardening, right? So chamomile, feverfew, goldenrod, lavender, primrose, rosemary. Some of these grow well in Florida. Like we have a native goldenrod. We can grow lavender. Some other things I haven't quite seen us be able to grow that well, at least from my own experience, like chamomile, feverfew, and primrose. Rosemary is typical in our environment because we have somewhat of a likeliness to a Mediterranean landscape. So some of those certain types of plants do well with us. And here's just some information that I found online about why these herbs are significant and why they're used in medicine and used throughout the world, really. This next slide is about just a continuation of that. Some commonly known herbs that we use, including sage, vervain, wintergreen, and yarrow. And I know that yarrow grows really well here. I've grown it in a number of gardens alongside some of my friends, and it's a really great one to get started with as well. And we all know that sage does very well in Florida too. So what we would recommend with fleet farming is to grow the herbs. The herbs is listed here, including aloe vera, basil, catnip, chive, cilantro, dill, green onions, lavender, lemongrass, mint, oregano, parsley, rosemary, sage, and thyme. And there's so many more too. If you think of an herb that isn't listed on any of the slides I just went over that you absolutely love, I would love to hear from you. So then we can definitely encourage people to plant that in their garden as well. And I also have some varieties. So something like an Italian basil in the Florida environment, you can grow it for sure, but it grows not quite as well or as strong, I would say, as something like African blue basil. We have grown that a lot with fleet farming. We mainly grow it by cutting. I'll get into more about how to propagate it by cutting. But we've just seen that they do really well. They have so many flowers all over them. It is typical to see in Florida, some of our basil get like little brown spots on the leaves at certain times of the year. That's totally normal. And I don't quite know why we get that, but that is something that you can typically see in like the Italian basil as well. Thai basil is great. So basil is definitely a really good one to grow primarily from cutting. Aloe, you can be able to grow from division, right? Because they kind of grow off of one another under the soil, and you can separate them and put them in different pots and grow more of that. Aloe vera is a amazing plant. There's so many benefits to this. It's basically one of the biggest healing plants that we have, in my opinion. I mean, you could use it on your cuts. You could ingest it and take it internally. There's just so many things from sunburn to any types of discoloration of your skin. Maybe you have like a little bit of a fungal problem. There's a lot that aloe can help out with, and it's so easy to grow. One thing about aloe is that if you put them in the sun, maybe for too long, sometimes the tips of the leaves will become a little bit red, and you can move them into the shade a little bit to stay a little bit more green. But they're a very easy plant to grow, succulent, if you will. Catnip as well, chives, cilantro. Dill is one of my favorite flowers to grow. They typically will do with a little bit less attention, right? As long as they start off in some good soil as seeds, you can grow them into these beautiful big yellow clusters of flowers. And I really like to grow the mammoth dill, as well as being a host plant for different pollinators. I'm pretty sure that I grew or I raised black swallowtails from my dill last year. Green onions are a really great herb to start off with as well, because you can harvest the greens and let them regrow and then keep harvesting them. So it's something that is hardy in the garden. It can help to have a little bit of structure. You can even use the green onions that you have at the grocery store, cut the bottoms off, plant them in the ground and watch that grow. Lavender, some people can grow lavender amazingly. And some people have a little bit of trouble. I would say lavender is a great transplant. So to make sure that you have a hardy plant that you are installing into the ground. They can deal with long periods of a lack of water. They're kind of more of that Mediterranean style plant too, right? They may need to be cut back at certain times of the year, but a really rewarding plant. Lemongrass is so easy to grow. So easy to grow. And like aloe, they kind of grow one off of each other underneath the roots. So you can separate them and plant them. And really, once you start to grow lemongrass, you may forever have lemongrass. They are very hardy, and you can use them for a lot of different things, from cooking to my favorite, which is teas. I like to mix it with honey and maybe a little bit of lemon, and it's a really great tea to have in some boiling water. Mint likes to go a little bit crazy. I would say it's something that you might want to contain within a pot, because what happens under the soil is the mint roots will basically just keep going and spreading, and if it doesn't have a defined space, they are a voracious grower, so they'll just keep going. And I planted this actually in my parents' garden at home, and it ended up growing with all of the grass in the backyard, which I loved, because every time I stepped on the grass, it would release that beautiful smell of mint. And so this is a really great one. You can also grow this from cutting. So if your friend has mint in their garden, you can just go there, cut it. It's better to start mint, in my opinion, in transplant form than seeds, because the seeds are super, super tiny, and it's just going to take more time. Not impossible though. Oregano, the same thing. You should probably grow them from cuttings, but you can grow them from seeds as well, or transplants. And the Cuban oregano has these really big leaves here in Florida, and they're very hardy. The Greek oregano also does well. I think that it's a pretty overall great plant. It's a companion to a lot of different herbs as well. Parsley, again, attracts a certain type of pollinator, pollinating butterfly, Rosemary, super hardy. Sage, super hardy as well. And thyme is a little bit more delicate, a little bit more slow to grow. They have smaller leaves and smaller stems, but they can deal with a little bit of neglect in the garden. And I think that, all of this is a summation of why people love herb gardening so much, is because it's pretty easy, right? They don't need as much attention as maybe something like okra or different types of vegetables. And they really can live harmoniously together and in pots. And they're more so perennial than they are annual, right? Which means that they can grow all year long. So these are all things that we love to hear in gardening. It just makes it a lot easier, right? So here's a couple different things that I have included. Remember, I'm not an herbalist, but this is just some basic information that I found about a couple of these herbs. So mint has vitamin A, iron, manganese, and folate. You can create it into a tea to help an upset stomach. You can also use it for brain function and headaches, and it can help improve the common cold, and it definitely helps bad breath, and we know that from mints, right? Lavender is really soothing. It's good if you're feeling anxious, or if you need to, go to sleep and you need something to help you out. It has that relaxing, calming kind of vibe to it. It has antibacterial and antiviral properties. Great in a bubble bath. Great in different types of soaps. If you're looking to make things at home, if you are that crafty type, I would definitely get some lavender essential oil and some dried lavender as well. And maybe you can make your own bath bombs. I think you use like citric acid and Epsom salts and a couple other things to make a mold of these bath bombs. You can add the dried lavender, and then once you put it into the water, it kind of fizzes out, and it's a really cool project. As well as you can make them into sprays very easily for your pillows, and different types of baked goods, teas. There's even lavender lattes. So there's a lot to do with lavender. Oregano, like I said, this is the one that I probably use every day. And I put it on a lot of my food because it doesn't really change the flavor too much, but it has those antibacterial properties. It's also loaded with antioxidants, including vitamin K, manganese, iron, vitamin E, calcium, other types of things. It can help to prevent illness. It can help other types of ailments. And it's pretty delicious as well. I would check with the herbalist too. Maybe oregano is something that you should be incorporating in your diet. Turmeric is really great for inflammation and as an antioxidant. Something like a turmeric milk mixed with almond milk or any type of other milk that you have. Turmeric, a little bit of black pepper. Black pepper activates some of the qualities that turmeric has, as well as some pumpkin pie spice or maybe some cinnamon and sugar, and you have a delicious drink and a delicious way to incorporate turmeric. My friend gave me the tiniest bit of turmeric, and I grew probably over 2 pounds of turmeric from that small piece. So it grows as a rhizome underneath the soil, and it kind of grows off of it itself. And so it really is an easy to grow herb, I guess you could call it, right? That is really good for the body. So turmeric is a great one for Florida, especially, as well as ginger. Rosemary is good for memory, upset stomach, joint pain, even hair loss. Some of my research I found. You can use it fresh or dried. You can cook with it. I think it's really great if you're roasting anything like vegetables or any kinds of meat or fish. You can incorporate that rosemary. I know that someone in your neighborhood probably has some rosemary that you could use for your own type of herbal medicine, or I've even seen people use the rosemary and olive oil. They'll put it in their olive oil to release some of the medicinal qualities, or even in a spray. So you say you're making a house spray for, cleaning your countertops. You can use something like distilled white vinegar mixed with a little bit of essential oils, and maybe some of the dried sprigs of the rosemary, and that can be something that you can use in your everyday household cleaning. The same thing with pine needles. Pine needles can also be used in that way. So when we talk about herb gardening and herb design, there's a couple different things, right? The first thing that we kind of think of, at least for me, is like the potted garden that I have on the last row on the first picture. And you've seen this before probably, where people have these cute little herb gardens and they're separated. They do well in this, but something to consider is that over time, the roots of these plants will start to circle right in that pot, which may make it harder for that plant to survive. So really, to give the plant enough space underneath the soil is something to consider. This first picture was kind of a cute picture, but I also think about the same thing. As those plants get bigger, they're going to need more space for their roots to be able to grow. I think it's great to incorporate the herbs into your landscape, like the second picture, and kind of give them their own spaces. I have found that something like rosemary, it puts out something through the roots. I think it's called a volatile organic compound that is kind of like an odorous chemical that prevents certain plants from growing around it. So that is something that might need to be on its own little in its own space, something like rosemary. But other ideas are just incorporating it into your vegetable garden, your raised beds, different types of planters. So there's no wrong way to do it. And if you do end up doing something like a small herb garden in like the potted picture, that is totally okay. Just consider the fact that if they start to look a little bit rough, it may be because you need to move them to a bigger pot. But I do like that idea for controlling things like mint, like I mentioned earlier, that can kind of take over and can kind of go a little bit crazy. Also, just incorporating herbs into a native landscape or a beautiful landscape design. Remember, these are just plants that, will naturally clump or expand into the garden. And I just really love these types of illustrations. I think it paints a really beautiful picture of how plants can live together and how you can have places of solace and places to maybe read a book in your garden and incorporate it into the actual design instead of it being separate, right? We typically see a lot of lawns that just dominate the landscape, but what if? Right? What if we had herbs? What if we had different plants that were perennial, that we don't have to be taking care of all the time necessarily, that they can kind of exist on their own, but they're taking up that lawn space and they're turning it more into like an herbal habitat. And I really like that as an idea for growing different types of wildflowers, herbs, plants in the garden. And also something to consider is the heights. So knowing that, oregano is going to get about, maybe the size of my, where my knees are or something like that. Or knowing that some of the ground covers that you could incorporate, like a mimosa, sunshine mimosa is going to be a little bit lower and your honeysuckles are going to be able to climb the trellis in the back. So that's why, the whole conversation on herbs and herbal gardening is so wide because there's so much to know, right? How plants grow, how big they get, what they like to be planted with, and all of that. So I would say if you are going to start an herbal garden, definitely just start with the plants that you really know that you want to grow, whether that's honeysuckle, rosemary, and basil, and just learn more about those specific plants so then you can create the best environment for them. And know that, gardening is just it's all an experiment. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. You could start again. Something really cool too that is known throughout the permaculture community is the herb spiral. Such a fun project. If you have bricks or rocks that you've been kind of thinking, what am I going to do with this? Maybe this is a good idea. The idea is that you create a spiral with these different building materials and you have soil that kind of comes up like a spiral staircase with the blocks. And you have at the very top, the inside of your coil, you have the drier plants, and outside you have the plants that need a little bit more water. So as an example, from the middle of the top out to the outskirts, here's what this designer had listed. Rosemary at the top, the driest, right? Dill, oregano, thyme, chamomile, echinacea, sage, yarrow, fennel, chives, parsley, coriander, calendula, feverfew. So from rosemary, the driest, to feverfew, the wettest, the idea is that when it rains, that water might trickle down to the bottom. You can also maybe install irrigation if you wanted to do that. or you could hand water this kind of design. So I would really be interested to hearing if anybody would like to plant an herb garden or herb spiral in their garden. What kind of soil do I use? So I typically will say, a type of potting soil. If you're starting from nothing, if you don't have any soil, you don't really have like a big soil provider in your area, potting soil is light and fluffy. It makes it easy for plants to put their roots out. Not a big fan of Miracle Grow, but this is just an example here. You can also incorporate your own homemade compost, and maybe we can have another class on that. But composting is really important to be able to turn our food waste into something that is really beneficial to the soil, a fun project. It helps to reduce the waste that you're sending to the landfill. So I definitely would recommend that. Mulch is really great to retain moisture. Sometimes in Florida, especially, we just have a problem with retaining that moisture, right? It's so humid that it seems to be that, a lot of our water is being lost. So mulch can help to kind of pack that in and keep it closer to the roots. And also something like an overall good fertilizer that's natural, like worm castings is really great, or any other types of natural fertilizer that you like to use is all amazing for being able to have healthy plants that have all the nutrients that they need to have a good fighting chance in your garden. If your plants are looking a little bit rough, like I mentioned earlier, they need a little bit of a pick-me-up, maybe some worm castings or kelp meal or bat guano or biochar or a different type of soil amendment would be good for you. And we have more information on that at fleetfarming.org. We have tons of information on soil amending and how to take care of your garden, free gardening guides, etc. So also you're going to be preparing your raised beds or your pots or your soil outside of a raised bed for your herbs. So the first thing is to break up the soil to break up any large roots. If you're growing near a tree, that's something to consider, that your plants are going to have to fight those roots as well. So maybe making sure that you have an area that's light and fluffy and ready to go for your herbs to be able to easily spread their roots out and grow. Another thing is to start your pots off right by having new potting soil, some worm castings, so they have everything that they need to grow big and strong. If you have a transplant or like a little plant that you want to add into a pot, make sure that that pot is maybe 2 or 3 times bigger than that pot that you start off with, because the plant needs some room for the roots to grow, right? You don't want to just make them feel like they don't have enough room to kind of spread out a little bit. The next thing is companion planting. And so I think that this is a really good idea. Like I said, if you know what you want to be able to grow, to just focus on the companions of that plant so you know what to plant next to it. And so this concept is just the idea, it's kind of like a folk science. People just have known this, passed down from generation to generation, that, certain plants just do well when they're planted together. Oregano is a friend to a lot of different types of plants. But here's some listed on the right-hand side of plants that do well together. So basil is great to be planted with parsley, oregano, and thyme. Mint is great with cilantro, kale, and radish. Oregano with basil, thyme, and sage. Parsley with tarragon, cilantro, and basil. And sage with thyme, oregano, and rosemary. And thyme with rosemary, sage, and oregano. You see a lot of them are kind of the same and similar in the fact that they kind of grow with the same types of plants. And also, I think that herb gardening can be really helpful in building confidence in the garden as well, because it's kind of hard in a way to put a combination that doesn't do well together. So I think that it's a little bit more forgiving than some of our vegetable gardens, right? So you can go ahead and try, and don't be too scared about putting them with the wrong plants. But if you put them with the right plants, it can help out a lot in their growth and the flavor and etc. So when we're talking about transplanting, all these different plants are really great for transplanting. I would say like all of them. You could grow, many of these from seed. Like dill would probably be the best to grow from seed. Everything else should probably be bought as a plant, as a transplant, or as a cutting. And so with the transplants, you can see in that first picture, those roots are going around the pot. That pot that plant was in the pot for a little bit too long. So what we might do is cut some of that or unravel them. So then when you plant them, you can imagine the plant is kind of relaxing into the soil and spreading its roots out and able to expand and grow instead of being tight and confined to that pot, right? And that second picture is a really great image because those roots are just light and fluffy and ready to spread out. You basically can just fluff up the root ball a little bit, place it in the soil about in line with the soil line, and there you go. Water it in, you're good to go. Since it's April, it's a really great time to plant a lot of different flowers, especially our edible flowers. So some of my favorites are sunflowers for sure. I grow the mammoth sunflowers and they grow as big as my head. They're absolutely massive, very easy to grow. Marigolds are great for a lot of different plants. Borage, dill, and then some of our Florida native plants like a black-eyed Susan. Other plants that are listed in this image are nasturtium. We have our cranberry hibiscus, different squash blossoms, etc. So these could be considered herbs as well that you can be planting in your garden. And then that leads us to Florida native plants. So there's a number of plants that are from the landscape that we could be using in medicines or in syrups or teas, tinctures, etc. There's so much to it. Like passion flower can be helpful in sleep and being able to be kind of more of a sedative and to kind of chill you out. And if you're using it in a tincture or tea, something like that. Elderberry is good for preventing illness. We have 3 different varieties of blackberries in Florida, including the sand blackberry. Saw palmetto is really great for men's health, I believe. Beautyberry can be made into different types of, I think, jams and jellies. An herbalist would know a lot more information on the different applications of these. And even if you wanted to take this and run with this in your research, these are some that I would really recommend looking into, like the dotted horsemint as well. And the list kind of goes on to plants that we might consider weeds in our yard. So this might be things like dollar weed, also called pennywort, Spanish needle, goticola, clover, parsley, Florida betony. These are things that we have in the grass, right, that are growing wild that we might think is a little bit of a pest to our St. Augustine lawn. Maybe not me, but these are medicinal plants as well. And one example of that is the Spanish needle. So Spanish needle is a flower that we usually see in the Florida environment, also called Biden's alba, part of the daisy family. You can boil the leaves, eat the flowers. It's antibacterial, supports bacterial infections, strep throat, and more. Having that into a tea is really calming and soothing as well. You could even put the flowers on something like a salad. So these are plants that we have so readily available, but we might not have been, aware that they can be used as herbs in our lives. Something that's really helpful for knowing what Florida native plant to plant where is floridayards.org. It's a database that can tell you, depending on where you are in Florida, your soil type, your moisture levels, what plants that you can grow in your area, whether it's trees, shrubs, ground covers, vines, wildflowers, you name it. They have this in the system, so you can know to plant the right plant in the right place. Also, the UF IFAS Extension Center is a wealth of knowledge. They know so much information. If you would like to buy your own plants, I would recommend not buying the Bonnie's plants from Home Depot and Lowe's. I repeat, do not buy the plants from Lowe's and Home Depot. That's the Bonnie's plants. They're heavily sprayed, and they can be really not so good if you want to ingest them, in my opinion. They also sell milkweed that is highly sprayed as well that hurts the monarch butterfly. So I would say to buy your plants from a local nursery. These are usually family-owned businesses. It's always better to support that anyways. But Green Isle Gardens is great, Lucas Nursery, South Seminole Farm and Nursery, or a different landscape provider in your area that might have herbs or might have different types of Florida native plants and wildflowers. So propagating, we're going to go into this a little quickly, but as you can see from the picture, this is an example of propagating basil. So I would definitely say, if you know of anybody growing basil, have a shot at this. It is so easy and so rewarding to be able to take clones of these plants. So what is propagation? It's the process of growing new plants from a variety of sources, including seeds, cuttings, which we're talking about, and other plant parts. Basically, water is a big activator. So if you wanted to use this as an experiment, you can have some fresh water and a clear glass of water to help stimulate some root growth. Once a plant has a couple inches of roots, you can plant that in the soil. Also, if water doesn't work, you can, I'm going to change this last sentence to, you can use rooting hormone. Basically, you take the plant, you dip it into water to get it a little bit wet, you dip it into the rooting hormone, and then you put it in soil, and that can help to start new plants. It's absolutely amazing that that science actually works, right? And one plant that you can definitely do that with is mint, because all of the stem of the mint plant, it has something what's called adventitious roots, or I like to say adventurous roots, where you can grow roots all along that stem line. So if it's stimulated by something like rooting hormone, or if it's cut and placed in water, it can start to grow new roots and all along the stem. What you'll need for this is a clear pair of clean pruning shears or scissors, glass of water, potting soil, in direct sunny area. And if you want to use the rooting hormone, you can do that. It's only a few dollars and it really does work. Also, instead of rooting hormone, if you want to be more natural, you can use something like a willow tea, like a willow bark tea. That is a natural rooting hormone tea as well. You can take the cuttings of these, place them in water, like I mentioned, and then soil. You can try to bare root, I think it's called, where you can just place it directly into the soil and try that as an experiment, or the water or the rooting hormone. It depends on you. But the way that you can do that is you can cut the internode. So just below the node, as you see in the picture on the right-hand side, the node is where the leaves meet. So you can cut right underneath that, and that would be a great spot for your cuttings. You would rip off all of the leaves above or below the top of the plant. And even to add a little bit more energy to growing the roots, you can kind of pinch off a couple leaves on the top, and it will help to have the plant grow a little bit more on the bottom. So this is an example of what that looks like. From the branches of a plant, you can find the nodes. So you can see in that first picture, the node is where the red line is pointing to. So we cut right underneath that. You can remove those lower leaves. The top, I would cut a little bit off the top. You can even cut the leaves in half. That just sends even more energy down into the bottom of the plant to be able to grow new roots. Place that in a clear glass of water on a sunny windowsill. Watch the roots grow, not too long, or they will be too dependent on that kind of environment. Not every plant can be grown like this, but a lot of them you can find that do. And when the roots are about 2 to 4 inches long, you can place them in soil in a sunny area and water. And here's some of the plants that you could do that with, including basil, potato, roses, rosemary as well, actually, lemon balm, mint, oregano, and thyme. My brother and I created a little bit of a device using a fish tank bubbler, and I put this in a clear glass of water to help with the oxygen in the water, because you do have to change the water out to keep the oxygen levels good for the plant to be able to grow, or it'll get a little stagnant and it won't grow as well. So we use the fish bubbler to be able to add that oxygen to help the roots grow even faster. And you can try this on hardwood cuttings or softwood cuttings of plants. I typically try it on the softwood cuttings, but it depends on the plant. And remember, it is all an experiment. So if you have any questions about herb gardening, we kind of went over a lot, what it is, how it can be used, how to start your herb garden, what it can look like, how to propagate plants, what plants to plant together. So I hope this has given you a wide variety of information on herb gardening. It's something that is pretty easy. Once you buy these plants or propagate them, you can try them in new, different sorts of plant designs and applications. These plants are kind of amazing in the fact that they have so many medicinal qualities and things that are really good for us and our bodies and our lives. So incorporating them more and more, I think, is a really great idea. So if you have any questions, please pop it in the chat box. And if not, we'll give ourselves a couple more minutes and we will conclude.
Hey, Caroline, thank you so much for that education. I know I took about 1 million screenshots of that. It's like different pages, so I'll be sharing those over here. Like Caroline mentioned, if you do have any questions, please post those in the chat. We can go through those now. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining us, Caroline. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We have a few fans in the chat from, I guess, this program and probably other ones that you've done. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I love talking about all of this, and I really hope that you're inspired to get started and, having the confidence to know that it's all an experiment and all you can do is try, and maybe you'll have a beautiful herb garden at the end of it.
Yeah, that's a great tip because I know it's gonna take more than one shot, and you just gotta remember that sometimes. I think that's important. Don't see any questions in the chat at the moment. I think you did a pretty thorough job of explaining everything like that and giving people a ton to think about. But a lot of people are just enjoying the event, and I agree. It was great. So thank you very much for joining us, Caroline. If you do have any questions for Caroline after today, you can go to ideasforus.com and use the contact link there. Is that probably the best way to get in contact with you? Or
yeah,
right,
you
awesome.
can email me at info@fleetfarming.org. You can go to fleetfarming.org. We have so many resources on gardening, soil amendments, pests, anything that you want to know. We also are on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. We have opportunities for you to come out and join us. So check us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very, very much for coming, and thank you all for joining us. We'll talk to you next time, and good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to find out when we have new fun and informative videos for you. Orange County Library System is your place to learn, grow, connect.